Welcome back, Honors. Oh my God. Not like I just spent like 20 minutes recording a flip just now and the thing wasn't recording. So basically I was just sitting in this room talking to myself. Which happens anyway usually, so it's not like it's that big of a deal. But today, I gotta say, I am so impressed with y'all right now. Y'all are blowing my mind. I think I got AP babies. It's like all running all over the place in this class because y'all are asking great questions, right? You were asking, okay, Mr. J, how did we get here? Where did these people come from? Why wasn't she queen in the first place? William and Mary, blah, 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 blah. Like you asked a lot of great clarifying questions, right? And we got a chance to talk about how the English tried absolutism before the French even ever pulled it off successfully. They gave it a shot, and it didn't really work out, right? So it didn't work out because they are a constitutional monarchy system, right? Nothing beats the Magna Carta.
Yeah! Yeah!
That one was for you, Jenna. All right, so now, the big thing, though, okay, so since nothing beats that document, you're going to end up having a constitutional system no matter what, all right? It's just going to happen, okay? So they ended up having a constitutional monarchy that was never broken, even though, ironically enough, when they got rid of the kings, that was the closest thing they ever came to an absolutist, because Oliver Cromwell is the worst, right? Remember, in your best British accent, always just say, no one likes you, Oliver Cromwell. All right, so now, ironically enough, there's probably going to be some British person that sees that video and calls me a xenophobe, which I'm not trying to be. It's just a joke. Y'all can mock our accent all you want. It's fine. It doesn't bother me. Now, look, so big thing, though, okay, we are now moving into France, right? We're going to be discussing the growth of the absolutist era in France, right? So do me a favor and in your notes, go France. All right, so, and you can do like a little wisp, right? Like, give it a little low. All right, so yeah, you can give it a little something, something. All right, so the babies. All right, now look, so you can actually write this down, and it's very important that you understand that we are going to see, more than anything else, a transfer in power, right? And we're going to see the growth of authority due to the fact that we're going to see the death of one family and a lot of wars over religion, right? So let's do this really quick, okay? We can go ahead and put this in your notes as kind of a guiding idea, just so you can know where we're going. So the big thing that you got to understand, yes, I just fixed my hair, leave me alone. Now, anyway, so, is that we are going to see the death of the Valois family, okay? We're going to see the Valois die out, and we're going to see the growth and birth of the Bourbon family, all right? As in Bourbon Street, the name that that it goes with the street that is so famous in New Orleans, right? That makes me sad and it smells terrible. But still, really quick. So if we're talking about this whole thing, if we were talking about weak kings, we're going to be referring to the Valois. If we're talking about strong kings, we're referring to the Bourbons, right? And these guys are our absolutists, okay? So these ones are the ones that are going to, oh, that is not a star. I don't know what that is. All right, so these are going to be the absolute family, okay? Now, it takes all the way up until Louis XIV to become an absolute government, but his father and his grandfather end up laying a lot of that groundwork for him, okay? So we will discuss that at length, okay? And a big thing that we're going to be focusing on in this flip is how this happened. Why did this family die out, and why did this one pop up, right? Where did they come from? Who was the first Bourbon? How did they get there? Blah, 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 blah. All right, so you need to know all that stuff, all right? So to focus on that and to understand it, you have to understand the crazy power dynamics that were going on in France, okay? A lot of really important things to remember. First of all, they had very weak kings, right? And the Valois are the weak kings. These guys are the weak kings. We're going to talk about a couple of them here in a second, all right? So we're going to come back to them, okay? Now, while they're having weak kings in these Valois, right, a while that one of them believes that he's made out of glass, right, so while this is all happening, the Valois kings are dealing with something, and they were the French Wars of Religion. The French Wars of Religion lasted from 1562 to 1598, right, and they're going to cause a lot of chaos in France, okay, because when we talked about the Reformation, we talked about all kinds of really important stuff. We talked about Martin Luther and the Holy Roman Empire. We talked about the Anglicans and Henry VIII, right? We talked about the Swiss under Calvin and his Geneva, right? We also talked about how John Calvin's actually from France. So some of you are like, Mr. Terry, you're an idiot. Why are you not bringing out France? We already talked about France. Well, he was ran out of France, Fair of the Placards, right? The posters showed everywhere. So now the big thing to understand, though, is that Protestantism is going to affect France, right? And they're going to see the growth of a new Protestant cell. And that group of people is known as Huguenots, right? So they're called Huguenots, all right? Not huge knots, all right? Learn to read. Now, look, Huguenots are going to be the new Protestants in France, okay? Now, notice I keep checking to make sure I'm recording because the idea of doing this all over again for a third time is my nightmare. Now, anyway, but Huguenots are Protestants, right? And it's going to go up against the Catholic majority of France, okay? Now, the Huguenots are a type of Calvinists, okay? So they are Calvinist Protestants, right? Now, some of you are like, oh, so Mr. Terry, you're telling me they don't like fun either? Yeah, well, they don't, not particularly. But the Huguenot cell of France is a little bit more chill about other people being not Protestant, right? They're a little bit more tolerant, even though they did do some iconoclasts and destroy a bunch of Protestant monument or a bunch of Catholic monuments and knock the faces off of them and stuff. But just so you understand, like when Protestantism does keep growing, they don't ever become super, super hyper politically active, but they do become a thorn in the side of every king that is a Catholic in France. Now, big thing though, Huguenots make up 7% of the French population, but 40% of the nobles are Huguenots, right? And these numbers are really important. They're really important for you to understand the fact that were these people converting completely for religious reasons, or were the nobles converting so they could grow their power a little bit more? And it's mostly the latter. Most historians would agree that most French nobles were converting to being a Huguenot, not so because they believed that Calvinism was the way to go. That's a part of it, but they also believed that that would grow their position, right? It would grow their position. It would make them be able to tell a Catholic monarch they didn't want to listen to him, right? So, whereas only 7% of the population was. So if you got 100 French people in a room in the 1560s, 7 of them would be Huguenots. But if you had 100 nobles from France in a room in the 1560s, 40 of them will be Huguenots, right? So this is really important that you understand what class is converting and why, right? So here's the problem, though. When these wars break out, right? When these wars break out between the Catholics and between the Huguenots because of a lot of crazy stuff. The Huguenots, like I said, were going in and trying to burn Catholic churches and knock the faces off their Marys and stuff like that because it's called an iconoclasm, right? They were doing all these things and fighting is going to break out because of it. The Huguenots are going to be at a massive disadvantage because the Catholics have the crown, okay, because they literally are in control of France, and then also they have more military, and they have a lot more money. So it's going to cost a lot of lives of the Huguenot nobles. But the Huguenot nobles are going to be able to stay alive because they're nobles, right? So now going back, though, we got to talk about who was leading France this whole time. During the 1560s, the people that were leading were the last Valois kings, right? The last Valois kings. And just to give you a little snippet so you understand how weak the Valois kings are, you do not need to write this down. Do not write this down. I'm going to fly through these guys so this flip isn't too long, okay? But this is a Valois king, okay? He's a Valois king from the Middle Ages. This is Charles VI, right? Charles VI of France believed he was made out of glass, right? Thought he was made out of glass and went mentally insane. He was also known as Charles the Mad, right? His mental faculties were not the best. We believe that he may have had paranoid schizophrenia or possibly bipolarism with delusions, right? Because he actually killed a couple of his bodyguards because he said they were looking at him funny and you might try to kill them, right? So you ever make eye contact with somebody in class and then they look away and you're like, what are they doing? So take that and then stab them to death. That's what Charles did, all right? So that's going to be a big thing, and he used to wear this big iron banded jacket because he was afraid if he fell down that he would shatter all over the floor, right? So obviously we have weak genetics in the Valois family. We also have weak leadership in the Valois family. This can be seen in Charles VI's son, Charles VII, right? Charles VII is the one that lost the French crown to a 4-year-old from England, okay? So this literally he was the king of France during the 100 Years' War, during one of the latter phases, and he is the one that lost the French crown officially, right? He's going to lose it, and he has to depend on a teenage girl to take it back for him. Not to say that y'all couldn't. I think, honestly, an army led by Aaron and Brooke Murray could really take over a lot of stuff, right? So, but the big thing is one of their heroes, Joan of Arc, is going to rise up during this period, and she is going to be the one that has to lead the French armies for Charles VII into getting back the crown of France, okay? So he's a weak politically king, right? We had a weak genetic king. We had a weak politically king. And then we also have a weak Renaissance king, right? So this is Francis I, all right? Francis I is also a Valois, but I find him to be hilarious, all right? So I think he's hilarious because of his backstory, right? One, he was the young, strapping, handsome Francis Valois, and he apparently was the big-time Renaissance king of France. He loved Renaissance art, was absolutely obsessed with it, had an Italian sculptor make him a salt shaker that now to this day is valued at over $60 million, all right? So it's called the Cellini Salt Cellar. This thing actually sat on Francis's table and had salt in it for his food. And it is made out of rolled gold, enamel, and ivory. That is insane, right? So it was worth, you literally just remove the top and sprinkled salt out of it, right? So that is now worth $60 million. It's in a museum in Austria. Now also, Francis I is going to buy the Mona Lisa, right? And who made the Mona Lisa?
Who painted the Mona Lisa? Mona Lisa. Oh, yeah. Da Vinci?
As much as it pains me to put that in there, I had to do it, right? So, now the big thing, though, about it is Francis I also was obsessed with Leonardo da Vinci. He thought he was the man, right? He was like, oh my God, da Vinci, I love your work. All right, so I love your work. I love the Mona Lisa. He bought it, he put it in his bathroom. That's why it ended up in France, and that's why it's in the Louvre now. It's a product, belongs to France because Francis I actually bought it. He then also tells Da Vinci, though, because Francis was young at this time, right? Francis had recently just beaten Henry VIII in a wrestling match. Remember we talked about that, the Field of the Cloth of Gold, right? It was a big bruise to Henry's masculine mentality. Well, this is the guy he lost to, right? Like, that is the guy that beat Henry VIII in a wrestling match. That's hilarious. But he invites Da Vinci to his home, and he's like, hey, die in my house, bro. Die in my house. I love you. Die in my house, bro. It's going to be fine. And so he tells him that he wants to die in his home, right? So he's like, I want people to wait on you, hand and foot, and I want everybody to take care of you. And then he's there the day that Da Vinci dies, right? And Da Vinci is sitting there trying to take his last breath. He's like, "Urgh." And Francis is like, it's okay, bro. It's okay. I got you. It's okay. You can let go. And then Da Vinci just goes, ugh, and lets out his last breath, and then Francis I proceeds to lean in and try to suck it into his face. Like, he tried to breathe in Da Vinci's last breath. That's so gross. And also, I was there to actually witness the entire thing. See, this is me right here going, what is this? And there's Mr. Bethune right there standing creepily behind the bed frame. All right, now look, so big thing, though, also you have to understand is now we're going to be focusing on this. How is it possible that the Bourbons took over the Valois family line when the Valois weren't dead yet? All right, so like, what happened, Mr. Terry? What happened that the Valois died out and the Bourbons rose up? A lot of it has to do with this guy, but more of it has to do with his wife. All right, so just so you understand, the last Valois kings are all super Catholic, right? So Francis I, uber Catholic. Charles VI, uber Catholic. This guy that we were just bringing up, Henry II, the last authoritative Valois king, uber Catholic, right? Very, very intense Catholic. And, of course, being at a Catholic school, it's just important to emphasize the Catholicism aspect of the French crown. Now, Henry II, though, is a very intense figure. Not so much in his ruling style, but because he died in a hilarious way. All right, so he died with 3 surviving sons, right? He had Charles, Henry, and Francis, right? So, and actually in the order it goes, I think it goes it goes Francis, Henry, Charles, by birth age, right? So Henry II died from a jousting accident, right? He was jousting another guy in a competition, and the 2 lances hit each other, and one of them exploded, right? Like the splinters went everywhere, and one of them went whink and like went right inside of his helmet and stabbed him in the eye, right? So got him in the eye, and he ended up dying. I like to believe that it hit him immediately. It was death on impact. Probably wasn't. More than likely, it was like slow death later on by infection, but boo, that's no fun. Right, Avon? That's no fun. All right, now, but the big thing that ends up happening, though, is now his wife is in charge, right? His wife is going to become queen regent and the assistant advisor to her sons, right? Because her sons are all super young. The one that takes over first, Francis II, very young, doesn't even see his teens, dies before that. Then Henry takes over. It will be Henry III. He doesn't see his 20s, dies before that. And then Charles IX takes over, their last son. And all the while, this is who was in the background advising them. That's their mom, right? And what their mom's name is. You should write this down. All right, it's very important. Jot this down. The infamous. Infamous means scary famous, right? Like literally famous for all the wrong reasons. The infamous last Valois queen. And what her name is very important. All right, so it's not the last Valois queen. Don't get me started. All right, now look. So her name is Catherine. Okay, jot that down. Catherine, Catherine. Day, D-E, and then her last name is, some of you are like, is she a Stewart, Mr. Terry? Because look at her hair. No, actually, this is her last name. M-E-D-I-C-I. That's right, Catherine de' Medici, right? So Catherine de' Medici takes over as the queen regent to her sons, and she is going to usher in a very intense moment here in about 2 seconds. But Catherine is the one who holds the true power in France at this time because her sons were all super weak, including this guy, Charles IX, right? Charles IX is very weak. You do not need to know him, okay, because he's that weak and he's lame, all right? Nobody likes Charles IX. Charles IX is a terrible king. He's not very strong. And also the worst part is he doesn't have any surviving children, all right? So he has no surviving kids, and I know he especially doesn't have any surviving boys, right? Charles the Ninth of France. No, not the 5th. Charles the... No, stop it. The 9th of France. There you go. Charles the 9th of France had Oh, no, never mind. All right, so that's actually Henry III. So now look, but the big thing, though, is that Charles is not going to have any surviving children. All right, so his brother ends up taking over, dies like 2 seconds later, right? So Catherine is left with one surviving child that can possibly pass the rulership of the Valois family off immediately and successfully. And her daughter's name is Margaret Valois, right? Margaret Valois. Now, the other big thing, though, is, like I said, Henry III takes over after his brother, also very weak, does not survive very long, has no surviving kids, right? But they had one surviving daughter, okay? So Catherine de' Medici's daughter right here is named Margaret of Valois. And to try and bring an end to all this religious chaos and violence, they decide to elect the idea of marrying Margaret off to a Protestant noble, right? To try and bring peace to France and keep all these wars from happening because it's affecting the economy, it's a lot of negativity. And Henry of Navarre is going to be the man that they choose, right? And he is a Protestant noble, very, very famous, very charismatic, and everybody's like, dude, he's going to be our next king, right? This is going to be crazy because when Catherine dies and when, like, Henry III dies, who is the last descendant of Henry II, when they all die, what's going to happen? Henry of Navarre is left in charge. And if anybody is watching this that's not in my class, I know that this is Charles IX. It was a mistake. Calm down. So now look, big thing is, though, okay, Henry of Navarre takes over. Henry of Navarre is the arrow, right? He is the transitionary member to the Bourbon class, right? Well, crazy thing happens. It's supposed to be a peace agreement. The idea was supposed to be the day they got married, the religious violence in France could come to a close, right? Because a Protestant Huguenot noble was being married to a Catholic princess. You could unite the two things together and make the fighting stop, right? Well, their wedding day goes down in history known as this, the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre, right? And it gets called that because after several different circumstances at the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre, Catherine has over 1,000 people that came to go see the wedding executed. That's right, all the Protestant nobles who showed up in Paris to watch the wedding between Henry and Margaret, right? They all showed up being like, yeah, we win. Huguenots rule, Catholics are lame, blah. And they show up to see this, and after a couple of negative things happen, Catherine de' Medici has the doors of Paris slammed shut because all these cities at the time were surrounded by a defensive wall. Has them slammed shut, locked in the middle of the night, and then they go around and they start killing all these Protestant nobles. And we have no idea how many people were executed on the day of St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre, but literally these are some of our artistic renderings, right? So they had all the gates shut, and thousands are going to be put to death in Paris. And some historians believe that as many as 30,000 all over France ended up being executed, which is wild to me. That is absolutely insane, all right? So, yeah, that's right. 30,000 people, possibly, in one day were executed all over France because Catherine de' Medici was just like, you know what? Get them. And literally had them all executed. That's insane. At the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre, which, again, just so you can jot down in your notes, the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre was supposed to be the wedding day of Henry IV to Margaret Valois, right? And this is Catherine literally standing over the bodies, the populace being like, eh, and literally just being like, ha, I am Catherine, the Ice Queen, right? So, she is very, very intense. And actually, when we come back to class, we'll play Where's Waldo, and we'll try to figure out in this picture where Catherine is. So now, look, what ends up happening, though, is eventually Catherine will die, right? So Catherine dies as the Queen Regent, and then also Henry III, the last Valois king. Henry III, the last Valois king, dies, right? He dies of some lame disease. I can't remember what it was. I know one of his brothers died from tuberculosis, but he ends up dying. So who is now left in charge? That's right, the Bourbon family. Henry IV is who he becomes. Henry of Navarre becomes Henry IV, okay? So check this out. See this right here? Henry of Navarre, the Protestant noble that Margaret Valois got married to. That dude becomes Henry IV, right? And he is the very first Bourbon monarch, right? He's the very first Bourbon, all right? He ascends the throne, and he's got a big issue he has to deal with. He has been fighting in these religious wars. He has been a Huguenot this entire time, and he is a very intense figure. And he's sitting there and he's going like, oh, what should I do? Should we keep trying to destroy the Catholic forces? I'm now the king of France. What should we do? He decides to convert to Catholicism to bring about peace, right? After many victories over the Catholic Union or the Catholic League of France, right? After many victories over them, he decides that he will convert to Catholicism to bring peace to his people. Because of this, he becomes known as Henry the Great, right? That and a lot of other reasons, right? Chicken in every pot. That was a big one, too. Now, conversion to Catholicism was a major thing, though. And he has a famous quote when he converted to Catholicism. And jot this down. It's very important. He said, Paris is worth a mass, right? And basically what he's saying like, rulership and peace are worth me going to a different mass rather than a Protestant one. It's not that important, right? He's like, it's all Jesus, it's all Christianity in the long run. So the big thing is I'm going to convert to Catholicism, and I'm going to make a document to keep my people safe. And so what he does is he writes a document called the Edict of Nantes. And at the Edict of Nantes, he makes Catholicism the official religion of France, right? But Huguenots would be allowed to work in the government, and they would be allowed to worship in their own right, okay? So he brings peace to France, and he ends the wars of religion and becomes known as Henry IV or Henry the Great, right? And in this whole process, he gets divorced from Margaret of Valois. He gets that annulled, actually. So ironically enough, the Valois end up dying out completely because he divorces the woman that he annuls the marriage to Margaret Valois, and he gets married to somebody else, Marie de Medici. Yeah, one of Catherine's cousins that he watched Catherine kill all of his friends at his wedding day and stuff like that. He marries one of her cousins, just stick it to her. Now, so they end up having several children, but one day Henry IV dies, right? He dies because he gets assassinated. He gets stabbed to death, right? So he gets assassinated, and that leaves one person in charge of the throne, his son, who would become Louis XIII. But here's our problem. Louis XIII is 9 years old, right? Louis XIII is 9. What are we going to do with a 9-year-old? What's a 9-year-old going to do? Bring back gushers. What's he going to do? Nothing. That's what. You need to wait until he gets older, right? This is what they needed. They needed an older king. This is Louis XIII because he's an older man. But you're going to see him take the throne at 9, and he doesn't even really start ruling effectively until he's in his late teenage years, right? 18, 19, almost 20, right? So now who's going to rule in that process, right? He's too young. He's very weak and very soft. The only thing European history really recounts Louis XIII for is, one, he is the, poetic hero in Alexander Dumas' The Three Musketeers, right? In that movie, that's Louis XIII, and Anna Austria is who he marries. But the big thing is he's known for bringing wigs into fashion and big billowy sleeves. He's a very soft ruler. He only truly ruled France for 3 years, right? And he never really truly ruled without an advisor. So who are his advisors? Who are they, right? So who are these people? Well, the advisors are going to be the Queen Regent, which is his mom, Marie de Medici, and this guy, his chief minister, Cardinal Richelieu. Any parent that's watching this right now that took a European history course when they were in college is like, I know this guy, right? So Cardinal Richelieu is a very effective, very intense, very authoritative leader. And we are going to stop here with this flint, and we're going to talk about Cardinal Richelieu tomorrow, and then we're also going to talk about Louis XIV. And I can't wait. Y'all should be super excited because I love talking about this dude, okay? So we'll talk about that then. So we're leaving off with the fact that Henry IV is the first Bourbon monarch after the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre, after Catherine de Medici is crazy, after the weak Valois kings, and then also after the French Wars of Religion, right? So now look, well, we'll talk about this stuff later, but the big thing about it is what is being created in this moment? A power vacuum, right? Religion is taking a toll, and what's being left behind now that nobles have died off during these religious wars is there is a ridiculous amount of power for a king to grab up. And a lot of it happens because of Cardinal Richelieu and his intense reforms, right? And that gives Louis XIV the power to rule absolutely. I will see you guys later. Y'all have a good one.